Hey there, or what's up fellas, as my favorite YouTuber likes to say. Thank you for tuning into my podcast, Maddie's Intellectual Nerds. Especially during these trying times we are having as a country due to COVID-19. Make sure you're staying safe out there and wash your hands. My name is Madison Schleep, and today we are talking about book reviews and romance novels, my favorite topics. The book that we'll be reviewing today is one that I just recently finished reading. That is A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. I absolutely adore this book, and it is definitely towards the top of my all-time favorite books. It is in the romance genre, which also brings us to the other topic that I want to talk about today, which is, why do you read romance novels if you already know the ending? So let's get started. A Love Letter to Whiskey is what many would call a slow burn. I would say it's an absolutely crawling slow burn of a book, because I would say the characters spend about 98%, give or take, of the book apart from each other. Oh, and just so you know, I think I might slip up and accidentally say something that could spoil the book, so I'll try to remember to say spoiler alert first. But proceed with caution. A few of the reviews that I read of the book before I started reading included a review done by the Babbling Bibliophile that talked about how it was almost painfully too slow for them and almost caused her to stop reading the book. But I also came to adore that about the book, because you get to learn so much about the characters themselves. A Love Letter to Whiskey is all about the slow burn romance between Brex and Jamie, aka Whiskey. Brex, or B as she likes to be called, is whose perspective we see the book through. She is in love with Whiskey from the very first drop. But as you can probably already figure out from what I've said, it takes them a while to get there. This book follows Bee and Whiskey through 4 different stages of their lives and deals with everything from heartbreak to death and just about everything else in between. I really love how the author compares Jamie to Whiskey, and is really unique play, and she ties it in very beautifully throughout the book. Bee coined him Whiskey because in a quote from the book, "What have you been drinking anyway?" "Whiskey," he answered easily, and a short laugh escaped my lips. Of course, I should have guessed. What's that supposed to mean? I shrugged, using a spoon to break up a large ice chunk before placing the top on the blender and turning it on again. Just makes sense. You're practically whiskey on legs anyway. The color of your hair, your eyes, the way you smell. It's like your spirit drink. I feel like this quote beautifully captures a lot of the thought that is going on inside Bee's head and her feelings towards Whiskey. Another quote that I feel like encapsulates Bee's feelings and is a very powerful analogy the author used is, "It took too long for me to realize that I'd dropped that beautiful bottle of whiskey. Too long to realize I'd broken it. By the time I figured it out, too long turned too late, and I remembered all too well the other way whiskey can burn." Because of how slow burn the book is, I think that we get to see their emotions more in depth, which I feel adds a whole nother layer of how deep the book is. You get to see how the emotions of the characters mature from high school to college and on to adulthood. It is a unique perspective that you don't get to see in a lot of books. While following them, you also get to see how they handle other relationships while trying to remain friends. This book brought a lot of different scenarios to the table that I hadn't seen put together like that in one book. It is a very enjoyable read. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I personally love reading romance novels because of how creative the authors get with them. Though I do get asked all the time why I read romance novels, because you always know the ending, but in reality, all of the endings are unknown until you read them. And personally, I read romance novels for the guts, not the skin. The guts are what makes that book itself. All of the personality of that book takes place in the middle, so even if every ending is the same, it's really the middle that draws me in and what brings me back to romance novels again and again. When dealing with the question of, why do you read romance novels if you already know the ending? I would say my answer is that you really don't. While many people see the whole genre of romance as this lovey-dovey instant love situation just repeated over and over again, I see it as wildly different stories with so many different situations going on. While yes, some romance novels, especially those trashy romance novels that you can get at the gas station, are indeed insta-love, overdramatic romance, that is not the case for most of the books of this genre. Many deal with all different types of situations. Personally, my favorite type of romance would have to be the slow burn that takes a while to develop. It really draws me into the book and makes me want to keep reading. But they also really vary in the amount of tragedy they have going on in the books. Which brings me back to the fact that all the endings are not the same, and the fact that some books they don't even get together in the end. Someone dies or some outside force is causing them to stay apart. Maybe in the guts of the book they were happily married. Sorry, excuse me. But something can happen, or someone can develop an addiction and they can be broken up by the end. In an article I found by All About Romance, she polled her readers and found that most believe that without a happily ever after, it's not really romance. But I really don't believe that. Because if there's love, and if there's, some of that lovey-dovey stuff, even if it's in the middle and they don't end up together in the end, it's still a romance book. But, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If they don't enjoy not reading not happily ever afters, they don't have to. That's what I love about romance. I also like to read romance novels because they are fun. When I think of pleasure reading, I think of reading something I enjoy. So for me, that means I'm going to pick up a romance novel. While that might not be the case for everyone, maybe someone out there on planet Earth or maybe in the galaxy, goes, what would be fun to read today? A textbook. But that is not me in the slightest. I want to get lost in my book, but not bored to sleep by said book. I did some research on this topic and found that many schools discriminate against romance novels because they can depict sexual situations, and they can even go as far as to place a book on the ban list. In an article I found from Duke University about book banning, it talks about books that have been challenged, which is the step before banning, for having things as simple as people kissing. Challenging a book could add the book to the banned book list for something as simple as having people kiss in the book. I feel that institutions that make people learn about slavery and all of the horrible things that have gone on in history should be able to deal with a book that has people kiss in it. With this discrimination against romance novels, when people are asked to pick a pleasure book to read in class for projects, many people won't pick or talk about the fact that they enjoy reading romance because it is seen as a taboo topic. In an article I found titled, "There's No Shame in Reading Romance Novels" by Megan Zinn, she talks about the fact that even in her graduate school course on the fundamental works of American studies, they read a romance novel and discussed it in class, and she was just blown away by the narrow-mindedness and misogyny that a class made up full of women had towards this book. She talks about the fact that they saw women that read romance novels as poorly educated, working-class women who had very empty home lives and were trying to make up for it by reading those gross, nasty books about something so fictional that only those women could enjoy it. But the way I see it as romance novels should not be treated any differently than those sci-fi novels that everyone reads. In all honesty, they're probably more realistic than the sci-fi novels, but yet they are seen as disgusting genre you should be ashamed of reading because of the fact that it's lovey-dovey. When in reality, millions of people read romance novels, albeit mostly women, but that's a topic for another time. But there is also nothing to be ashamed of reading about reading romance novels. I think that there is nothing to be ashamed of about reading not romance novels, and the book that I read was such a great read. And I recommend it to everyone that is looking for a new book to read. All books are different, and I don't think that people should discriminate on a whole genre just because of the fact that some of them are over the top. I'm looking at you, gas station romance novels. But thank you for tuning into my podcast. Come back next week and we can discuss why men should read romance novels. Thank you.